Have you ever thought about the way the back of your haircut looks and what to ask for at the hairdressers? This is something that I was asked a couple of times recently, and I thought it would be really good to share this because now we often look at hair trends or hairstyles about how they frame the face, what they look like from the front, but no one ever talks about how your hair's supposed to look from the back. In this video, I'll talk about the different options to ask for when it comes to the back of your haircut. Also, how the decisions you make about the back of your haircut can affect the front and vice versa, what to actually ask your stylist for, and what can be better for different hair types. So obviously the back of the haircut can change a lot depending on the length of your hair. If we're talking about very short hair, the thing to consider is whether you want your hairline to be straight or whether you want it to be softly faded. This works for haircuts for any gender. Typically a fade is going to give a soft fade down from skin into hair, and that's going to give a softer look and tends to grow out quite nicely. A sharp line at the nape of the neck is going to look more structured, more strict. As good as the hair starts to get a little bit longer, it can tend to grow out not quite so well, especially if you've got a low hairline. Now when it comes to bob lengths or kind of chin length shapes, you need to know whether you want to have that graduation, that lifted, or whether you want it to all come down to one length, and whether you want that line to be straight or whether you want it to be soft and choppy. Now, as we get longer and we come to shoulder length or below, it's really about that perimeter line. You could have a perfect straight line. I call that like a little girl haircut because it's a very long sheet of hair like you'd get little girls' haircut like. You can also have the hair taper into a point, which is typically accompanied with layers. It's very difficult to make the hair look good if it's cut into a steep point, if it's not layered. Can, however, have a soft curve to the bottom and still keep the hair all one length. Now, something that I always like to share with my clients is if you're going for a mid-length style, having it cut slightly shorter at the back and getting longer towards the front gives a much more modern midi kind of style to that length, because this length can go a little housewifey, and if that's not what you're going for, going a bit shorter, not high, but a bit shorter at the back and cutting down to a slight point towards the front with that shape and layers in the middle is going to give you something that looks a lot cooler. Now, when your hair is cut straight across the back, it's really important to know that when you bring it in front of your shoulders, it's always going to go into a point. It's never all going to match up at the front. Your hair's been all brought back to the same point to cut. So that really can affect the way your hair looks from the front. If your hair is cut in a soft curve, when you gather it forwards, it can end up looking straight at the front because the slightly longer hair at the back and shorter hair at the front begin to create the same length when everything's brought forwards. If your hair is cut into a really steep point, then you'll find when it's in front of your shoulders, it looks a lot more thin on the ends and a lot more piecey. This can work really well and look very nice, but it's important to know. So a little bit of terminology here. I think the best way to communicate with your hairstylist is to use photos. That means there's no misinterpretation or different ways of using language. But when the hair gets longer towards the front, we typically call that A-line. If it's all the way around the same length, it's typically called square. And if it's shorter at the front, getting longer at the back, that might be a bit more rounded. So consider how you want the back of your haircut to look in the perimeter and whether you want it to be blunt and sharp or soft or faded. That's the kind of information that you want to share with your stylist. Now, when it comes to different hair types, finer, thinner hair types always work much better with sharp, blunt lines because it encourages the look of thickness in the hair. If you, however, have very thick hair or particularly very curly hair, having the hair all the way down cut blunt can tend to make it very bulky and bring all the weight towards the ends. Have you ever thought about how the back of your haircut should look? Let me know if this is going to change anything the next time you get your haircut.